will do that. Ms. Parker, Ms. Kinser's here, Mr. Fulbright, Mr. Moore, Ms. Urban, Mr. Sims, Mr. Hooper, Mr. Howell, Mr. Lindsay, and Mr. Dudley. Ready to go.
All right. We have some items on our consent agenda. I know we got bogged down talking about some of these last time. We'll move on unless anybody has some things to talk about as far as minutes, school trips, or use of facilities. All right, new business. We'll turn it over to Mr. LeComan.
Good evening, board members. The financials are posted on the agenda. You can also see that we had a surplus of $4,635,306.50. I would like to report also that some of this surplus is made up of projects that were not completed in their entirety. So we're going to go through, find what those are. I can suspect that, the board would like to commence to probably spending this money. But with that said, there are some projects that were not completed in the fiscal year, so that will be needed to be taken out of fund balance per your request, things that have already been voted on and approved. But after that, we can commence to allocating these monies towards projects if the central office and school board would like to move forward on those things. So I would just like to report the surplus as it is now. You will see budget amendments at your voting meeting in September to reinstate those projects that did not finish and take them back out of fund balance where they currently reside.
Okay. Is there any questions or comments for Mr. LeComan? Mr. Lindsay.
Since we're talking about fund balance, we had a couple of months ago started discussing possibly taking the money out of fund balance for some athletic needs. We kind of set that to the side waiting on the budget to pass, and I assume the budget passed the county commission for the last reading last night. Not to put you on the spot, Doug, but what's your best guess of when you think that might come back?
I think we could get it back as early as the 26th of August. I would, caution that it would probably be closer to August 31st. It usually takes 10 business days to get it back from the state. It'll be submitted to the state tomorrow morning. It's just pending some cash flow forecasting information that we got to get from another department.
So with that being said, I don't think our next voting meeting is for 3 weeks the way the calendar falls. So I would like for staff to bring that back then. Maybe the budget's back. Maybe we can start moving forward with those if the board so chooses. But also along those lines, I know in the capital request there were, I think Mr. Perriman had $2 million for maintenance, $4 million. So I would also like to see maybe a list of what you guys had in mind as far as those expenditures. Just to be upfront and frank, I'm as long as Doug doesn't tell me I'm crazy, I'm totally comfortable in taking that $4.6 million that's going into fund balance and taking care of some of these needs we have. So we haven't decided what we received funding for last night, but we did receive $74 million. But personally, my expectation is that's probably not going to go to maintenance, and Mr. Perriman has told us numerous times that he needs maintenance money. So personally, I would like us to take a look at that and maybe take some of that money, give to Mr. Perriman for maintenance and work on some of our athletic needs.
Okay. We can bring that up the next voting meeting. Is that okay? Any other discussion on the financials? Seeing none, I guess we've moved it. Let's go to consent agenda, doesn't it? Okay. Yeah, okay, FY, okay. my brain still feels like it's not quite in this meeting yet, so I apologize for that. We'll go on to new business number 2, instruction. Mr. Gaines.
Good evening. Just wanted you to, if you have any questions about the survey responses from our district-wide PD sessions at the beginning of the school year. We have those there, or just wanted to see if there are any questions.
Ms. Kinzer.
I'll just comment, I know that you all had gotten some indication that some board members really felt it wasn't, but I've really gotten really good comments about it, that it was, you know, for the most part, am I right? I mean, I'm looking behind y'all. When I looked at one sheet that gave all the different options, I thought that would really be neat, as far as there was plenty for art teachers or fine arts, there were plenty for this, that, and other that you can meet with their peers. One of the objections I always had about PD is that it didn't always apply to me. And somehow there was a little something for everybody. And so I think that that was a pretty big thing to have to plan it and pull it off. And so hopefully, none of us like PD. I can tell you that. I mean, it's not something we look forward to or leave and say, oh, I wish we could have more. But I think that it was well organized.
And I'd just like to add that a big, shout out to the instruction department. They spent many long days making sure we had that. It didn't start just the day before. It started months before, and they worked hard and diligently to make sure that we were able to provide a PD that was more friendly to teachers this year, to include teacher input and teacher training.
Thank you very much. Mr. Howell.
So, after hearing people talk about spending money on PD and how our PD is not that great, and I actually took 2 days and went to both days of the professional development and slipped in and out. I stayed for most of the classes. I didn't slip in and out. I stayed with the classes because I went to the classes that interested me, or pertained to me, or, as much as possible. But, or I had interest in, I'll just be honest. And I went through the ethics class. I went through some required classes, and I just want to say that I found it to be great. I enjoyed going to it. I learned a lot. I learned more than I, probably needed to know. But I noticed that a lot of it was it's our teachers. So to say that it's not good, you're telling us that our teachers aren't presenting information good. I don't see that. But I just want to say that I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to being invited to some other ones and going to some other ones. I can't guarantee I can go. The stars aligned that time, and I could go to both of them, and so I did. But thank you. I really appreciated it, and I had a great time.
Yes, I do think that that's a important thing, is that we become involved and engaged as well, because it does open our eyes to what the teachers are going through in many cases. In fact, I know one of the trainings I saw on the list was a training that I had actually lined up for my job the following week. So I was glad to see that we're getting a very diverse range of instructional opportunities. All right, no other questions, it looks like? Mr. Gaines, I'll turn over to number 2, teacher growth positions.
What we're presenting to you guys is to give us the authority. We did not put any new positions in our budget, but as you guys have been given the growth of our district this year, we're already up 500 students than we were last year. We're getting close to that 20-day count where we've got to have everything fixed. Or we get the dirty letters from the states and they're not going to give us BEP. We'll make sure to use the positions cautiously. We'll make sure to keep you guys in the loop how and when we'll be using those growth positions. Many of you already have seen those, and some schools are really well over their ratios. We do have a couple schools that are under, and we are looking at ways where we can maybe take away if they have a vacancy position, or and move that vacancy position somewhere else, or ways that we can move them if we have to another school. But with that said, with we ended the year in our budget with the number we gave you, and we knew growth, and like I said then, I will be in front of you August, September asking for new positions. What we're asking for until we get that official BEP right now is 10 positions. We do think that those 500 additional students will come back to us via the BEP because they do have to take those numbers into account.
Okay. Ms.
And
Kinzer. Go ahead.
Let me say this too, and we've also asked to put it on the special call because we just feel like positions with 25, 26, 27, so we want to be ahead of the curve. And also, as you know, most of you all have your own children, that you know those bonds are being formed, especially in elementary, and we don't want to wait too late to where it's some real anxiety when we move kids out of classrooms.
Thank you. Ms. Kinzer.
Well, I know you all are aware that we have not filled all the teaching positions we have. But what that also equates to is that we're not paying the salaries this month of any of those positions. So it's kind of a savings in a way that we can use that money for extra positions. I don't know where we're gonna find them, but I think from what I have heard, the sizes of some of the classrooms, and you all know, we're at the commission meeting and one of the commissioners is asking Mr. Pearman to buy furniture because his granddaughter doesn't have a seat to sit in. So I think we knew from the beginning that when we saw the numbers, we might have to bring some of these positions back. I think 10 positions is probably not enough, but I think it's doable from a financial standpoint because you're not paying the salary of not 69, but there, a lot of those are coaching positions, I know, but that's still funding that we're not paying out. So I would hope that we would approve that.
Mr. Howell?
So, yeah, I fully expect you to be back asking for these positions as well. I knew you would be back, just, you know, or I hoped you would. I hope it would grow, and now we're here. Although I don't agree entirely with Ms. Kinzer, I do to a point. I don't think that it's a pay issue. It's the fact that there's just no applicants. We can offer $5,000 more. We can offer. Williamson County's not getting the applicants, or Rutherford County's not getting the applicants. So I mean, those both pay more than we do. So if they're not getting the applicants, I don't think it's a pay issue. It's just a teacher shortage issue, which is why I think it's really more imperative that we start growing our own right here. We start with programs. We start with initiatives. We start with Columbia State and the 2+2 program, and get current employees certified that want to be certified to be teachers. You know, now I'm not saying we don't need to take care of our own, because we do. We need to take care of our own and do what we need to do, and I'm not saying pay is not a part of that, but I think if we just had to, we're already behind the curve. I mean, you know, obviously we should have been hiring these people in May, and instead we were shedding 25 positions. Not central office's fault. The buck stops here. It was our fault. We approved that budget that let that happen. So going forward, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, we can throw money at it until we're blue in the face. We can double the salary. That would probably move the needle, right? Unfortunately, we can't afford to double the salary, but I don't think that we can just afford to throw a few more thousand here and a few more thousand there and a few. That's not going to attract and keep more people here. We're going to have to fundamentally figure out what it is, if we need to develop a new culture or what we need to do to keep our educators here happy and recruit more. I don't know the answer. That's kind of what we pay y'all for. So I hope y'all can come up with some good solutions and for us to choose from that we can afford. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Lindsay.
So what happens, you talk about getting that nasty letter in the mail, so what happens if we just can't fill those positions?
As long as we can show that we're making effort to fill them by actually have them posted, that we would be okay.
Yeah, and I think he was talking about moving some of those vacancies into those very positions, but I don't think there's enough vacancies for so many of them coaching positions. All right. I don't see any other lights. Do you have a firm motion or proposal that you're going to be bringing to the special meeting right after this?
Yes,
Is the
and I
10
know,
the number, or?
and I know Doug wants to talk on it, because usually this would be a budget amendment, but as of now, we don't have a budget. But, we talked to Doug, and I think he has some solutions, and I'll let, if you're okay, let him speak. But we wanna bring 10 growth positions.
Okay, Mr. Lacona, can you give me a very quick explanation?
Yes, to stay within the law, I think we, proceed to attempt to fill these positions and get a budget amendment in front of the board as soon as we have a budget, for approval to go ahead and amend the budget for this action.
Okay.
Because we're outside of the law with BEP. That's our main funding. I think it's important that we try to accommodate, that we would try to get people to apply, and then we'll bring a budget amendment for your approval to actually approve the funding for these positions. You'd be looking at $600,000 approximately, with an average salary of $50,000 per teacher. If, that could vary depending on who gets hired, their years of experience, degree, all that good stuff, so.
Thank you very much. Just to reiterate something we always mention, not only is it the state requirements that we have to fit ourselves into, not only is it the budgetary stuff we have to fit ourselves into, but doggone it, smaller classrooms are better for the students, and that's what we need to remember as much as anything else. So all those other things are important, but we always talk about focusing on the kids, so let's bring it back to that for this discussion. Thank you all very much for your input and information. We'll take this up later this evening. ESSER 3.0. I cannot wait till this does not appear on this agenda anymore.
Well,
Probably y'all
I
too.
can't say it, that it will not appear on this agenda a few more times anyway.
First my
Yeah, yeah, with the possibility of another ESSER.
Oh, don't need to say that. Okay,
So-
anyway, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening. I think we went back and tried to do things you asked in terms of, how does this fit within growth? What are our outcomes are expected? I think I put that in the first opening paragraph. We looked at national trends, what other people were spending, how are they addressing their actions also. As you know, we did an initial survey. We came up with some initial ideas based on, what we thought was needed. We asked stakeholders, we received that feedback, we translated that into some ideas that were presented. I think you asked us to come back with some items in lieu of if we didn't add the HVAC funding. So we did that, and we also told you the outcomes for those. I will let you know that, there's a possibility that when we talk about more ESSER funding, with the infrastructure bill, there's a portion that will go to schools. And what they're saying right now, it's approximately 80% of your ESSER 2 amount. So you're looking at $6.5 million that would be for infrastructure. So we didn't see word that that's been approved yet, but that is, we have a template that's part of this ESSER application that we have to fill out, and it already specifies, hey, that this amount will be this much. And it even asks us, what do we intend to spend that money on if we were to receive it? So that's a part of that application. It may appear before we get through this process, but I just wanted to let you know that. And as we said, folks are ready to answer questions about different parts of that. And again, we'll open it up for questions and ready to answer any questions.
I want to ask two questions. First, could you give me an overview or whatever you want to tell me? How much board contact and input did you receive? Not did you reach out, how much was provided to you in terms of incoming phone calls, incoming emails from board members since last meeting to this meeting?
I talked to Ms. Kinzer. I know I talked to I think I talked to some other board members in between time, maybe 2 or 3 board members, but board members that actually called me, I called them and received input.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I'll be honest, I didn't call you, and I'm not going to pick this apart for you because I put it in your hands. All right, Mr. Lindsay.
I talked to Mr. Hickman for 40 minutes today, so he, but
Sure.
if you guys saw, I had sent an email to Mr. Hickman, copied the board on it. He answered that in the Friday memo a couple of weeks ago about textbooks. So, I wasn't here for the last meeting, but I watched it, and I thought Mr. Hickman really went to bat for textbooks in that meeting. And, so along those lines, with having the opportunity for this money, for these monies, my goal became for you guys to figure out a way that we put this textbook dilemma to rest. I mean, it's something that I've been hearing about for 9 years now. So my goal is to provide every kid that we have with every textbook that they need, and on a 1-to-1 ratio, not having 25 textbooks for 150 kids at a school. So, with all of that, you guys sent us some information. In your proposal here, you have $3.9 million for textbooks, and then the information that Mr. Hinkman sent was another roughly $700,000. I don't know if that $700,000 was included in that 3.9 or it is in addition to. But I'm going around the world to say that I'm ready and willing to give what we need, but I don't want to come back a year later and my third grader come home and say they don't have a social studies textbook, and that's just some example. But I want to put this to bed once and for all. So.
Mr. Hickman?
And Scott and I spoke about this. You know, we went through with the principals. We made sure that we had what textbooks we needed that were adopted textbooks, and we also put in a measure for growth. But I do want to put the asterisk, you know, growth is just booming right now. So we're trying to align how much longer we have this adoption to our potential growth. But as of now, yes, it's 1-to-1, except for our Discovery Ed, which I'm going to talk to you a second about that, which is it's an ebook, which is everybody gets, but it's not a textbook. And we're going to make sure that we have enough for growth. Now, if growth blows up, it'll be very minimal. We may say, hey, we need to get 10 more of these or 5 more of these. But we have put in that number too. Ms. Parker had also asked me, because she wanted me to check into the Discovery Ed textbook, specifically about what it would take to readopt something. And, you know, first of all, I'm going to give you my recommendation. I don't think we need to do that, and I'll tell you why after I tell you what the steps are. Fortunately for this board, I had to chase down a lot of people at the state to finally get a good answer. If you readopt a book after you have adopted one, you have to go through the whole cycle again with the committees. You have to put it out for public information, and then you have to come back and vote on it, unless you do a blanket adoption. In other words, the board or the recommendation that happens when there's really not a great choice from all of them, and we say let's do that. We did vote for a blanket adoption on the science textbooks. Now, here's where I don't recommend us doing that. In 2024, we are readopting science. Science comes back up. Is they have the standards review. One would be buying the textbooks for next year, which really gives us 2 to 3 years with that textbook. The question was asked, well, what if we just say we're going to keep that textbook and not adopt another one? What I caution you about is you're playing a little roulette with that, because standards review, usually standards do change. They may not change significantly, but they can, and usually they have some change or the scope of what they are, and that would make our textbooks no longer align to the possible new standards. However, per grade level that changes. But we've seen science change significantly every time they brought it up for adoption. We've seen math this time. We've seen some significant changes that's going to happen in the next for our science. That one, it's going to be costly, and two, you know, if it is something the board says, well, we're going to do this instead of adopting in the 2024 cycle, that it's a guessing game.
in our conversations, we talked also about, unfortunately, we've gotten behind the 8 ball when it comes to adoptions, that if we have an adoption coming up, say we had an adoption due this year, we put it in this year's budget. Here we are, August 16th, whatever the day is, and we're still waiting on our budget, which means we would not have ordered. So, point being, I hope we get ahead of that curve and that we get new textbooks in instructors' hands months and months before that new school year starts.
Correct. Mr. Gaines alluded to that last meeting. Well, not alluded to it, he said it in last meeting, was that we want to help this have ESSER to help us to get ahead of the adoption. In other words, to help rephrase what he just said is, we want to have the money in our pocket the year we adopt it. So if the board decides we're going to we adopt that textbook, that curriculum in April, May, we've already had the money to purchase it. What you saw happen was with the ELA is we adopted it, but we didn't put it into the budget until the next year. So we had to wait till the budget passed before we could actually buy it. So therefore, once the budget passed, even though it passed pretty quickly in May, it still took us, well, I think it was past May, but it took us to August, September before we were starting to get the actual textbooks in, because we are adopting from these companies and purchasing from these companies. Another word of caution to you too, you may have heard, we haven't got some of these textbooks, we haven't got some of these workbooks. We've been put on notification that there's a paper shortage in America. And we are told that they will get all these books to us as quickly as possible. It's no fault of ours why some of those are not in kids' and teachers' hands, but we were notified that it's a paper shortage, and we did let principals know that before school started.
Ms. Kinzer.
I probably have a couple of questions and comments, and I did spend a little more time looking at all this. We don't have enough devices for all of our kids, so we need to explain that to me, devices for 5th grade.
So, with the remote learners coming back, with the growth of 500, I forgot the number he gave earlier, of students, we're kind of a few short in each grade level. The 5th grade level, having the ability to use the 8th from last year will help fill those other gaps. We've actually sent out a survey, and due to growth in the 5th grade level, we're actually 150 short right now for to have 5th grade 1-to-1, let alone 6, 7, and 8. So that's where that falls into with the growth that's happened.
Okay, I definitely think, I mean, is this enough? This is an opportunity for us to make sure that everyone has a computer. Is that going to do it?
Yes, I mean, that filling those in, and with the ones that's left, again, with what we have right now, we're 150 short, technically.
Okay.
But if we purchase, in just 5th grade,
Okay.
if we were to purchase all of those 5th grade devices, then that gives us the extras for the growth in the other grades.
There are a lot of personnel asked in this, even in the initiatives, the alternative initiatives. Again, we're going to run into the same thing we're running into now with teachers, but I don't think we shouldn't try. And I think all of them that you have proposed here are things we need. Especially appreciate that you, Mr. Howell, talked about that we need interventionists to help with the social and mental. That's in here. I like that. I like the increased substitute pay. That needs to be in here. But another thing, and I guess maybe because you know that I'm like a broken record, I do feel like that, and I think that I initially, when we talked about ESSER a few months ago, said we talked about giving the teachers $1,000. Well, once you take out FICA and all the things you have to take out, it's not $1,000. But at $1,500, and even doing it one semester, the next semester, I like the idea too that that'd be an incentive for everybody to stick around for the second semester, so they get their bonus. I think that's brilliant. But I would really hope that this board would give them the $1,500. I know we couldn't give them any more than a raise than what the state gave them. We didn't give them a raise; the state gave it. And for the first year, we had to do what they told us to do, and we did. But we didn't give them anything. So this is an opportunity that we can thank them for the year that they've had, which has been absolutely incredible. You know that because you had the kids at home teaching them, right? Some of you. You know, you can call it combat pay or whatever you want to call it, but I think they deserve it, and I would hope we would leave that in it. One question I have, Mr. Gaines, if we were to approve all this and take the HVAC out, would we be able to do all of this?
If you look at the total down on the alternative funding items, we're at somewhere in the neighborhood of, let me go back to it, I'm sorry. I think it was about $9 million. So if you took the HVAC out, that's 6.7. We still have approximately 5 million left in ESSER 2 that we could devote toward. There are some other possibilities that we have for ESSER 2, and we're it's not going to be the whole amount. They have an opportunity for us to do tutoring with students after school, where the state will provide a certain amount per student, and we provide a match. We're looking at that right now. That's Tennessee All-Core. So we would have to provide that portion out of ESSER, but it wouldn't take. What I'm saying, it wouldn't take all the 5 million. So we could conceivably fund all those items out of between ESSER 3 and ESSER 2,
Okay.
and the remaining ESSER 2.
One more thing, and I won't take up any more time. You have said in the past that we would apply for this, we'd tell them how we plan to spend it, but down the road, if we saw a need, we could change our mind. Is that correct?
Yes, we can always ask for amendment, and as you know, just for example, with the 20 teachers that we're proposing to add for either class size reduction or things like that, we're a month in, so that's already $100,000 that we're, possibly that we're not going to use. So, and then thinking by the time we hire teachers, it could conceivably be that money would be left over. So at that point, we're always looking at, okay, what's the next thing down, because we know we have a window of all this money needs to be expended by FY24, not that we're just trying to randomly spend stuff, but we're always trying to look at, okay, if we can't do this, what's next? So if we have money left over, we're trying to think about those items that we can fund.
I'll give you the perfect example. In ESSER 2.0, we budgeted for summer school based on the estimates that the state gave us. So we recouped a lot of that money and was able to say, hey, now we have some more money left over in ESSER 2.0. Not because we mis-budgeted, it was the state came in with more money than they told us they were going to.
So other than the air conditioning units, is there anything in this, all this huge, humongous ask here, that we need to delete? That not considered?
I can see all things that we as a staff presented it, we reviewed it as a staff, we tried to go back and say, why wouldn't we need this? Is this something that's not necessary? We tried, we used surveys, we presented it back to principals, talked with them about the input we had. So we also, as I told you, as we got our scores back and had the opportunity, or we got our draft scores back, we did root cause analysis with principals and the teacher council, and some of those root causes came back to some of the same things that we needed support in using our ESSER funding.
Okay, and one more thing, I promise you, and then I'll let you all talk for sure, but are you all having principals do a plan of how they're going to deal with learning loss? Are they doing a written plan, or? Why are you laughing?
Make a long story short, yes, we are having a plan, but we're, a lot of that is making sure we have this before we start initiating it.
At some point, once we get through this and they submit those plans, I think the board would love to see them.
Okay. And one of the things we're doing right now with our principals is we are really taking a step back in the PD we do. One of them is, I've told you guys, the McCrell Balanced Leadership, which you are invited. It's another PD for administrators to come. Please watch that, because it is about putting a principal on plan to sharpshoot your top need first, Then we're also working with them on root cause analysis of the learning loss. And, if anybody's ever done a root cause, I think you, strategic plan, y'all did one for that. We're doing that with them for the learning loss. So, you know, we wanna make sure we're not just throwing things out and seeing if it sticks. We wanna make sure that we are being very adamant and very specific what we target and how we target that over from what it used to be, was where they just came in with a list of questions, we answered it and said, have a great evening, to now they submit the questions, we answer it, hand it out, but we're using them too to help us, guide us where we need to go with the teacher perspective on that root cause, because we need to be very targeting what we do, because if we have too many targets, then we might as well not have a target. So we're making sure that we're including the principals and the teachers in that guidance. And then we will also have plans, and I've already talked to Renee, who is our title coordinator. She's gonna also, we're gonna do it with parents, kind of get their perspective of what we need to target as well.
Okay, Mr. Moore?
Great, thank you. Just two questions.
Ms. Kinzer, were you done? I didn't even. I am done. Okay, Mr. Moore.
Two questions. Staff, I know it's still the same thing we've got here. Do you guys still stand by the original presentation that had the HVAC request in there? I mean, we've gone over this a couple of meetings. We've thrown, you know, as boards have thrown some other things in. Are you guys standing by that original as it stands? There's nothing you guys want to swap out? You kind of talked about it a second ago. I just want to make sure that I understand what you guys are still proposing as a staff proposal.
You know, and I don't want to make this a long narrative here, but, you know, once the board asked us to put it in there, we did as they were told. Was I surprised? Yes. Was I like, that's really not the direction I want to go? Yes, it was not the direction I wanted to go. However, once it was put in there and then we started telling the county commission, I feel like, you know, we told them we would, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay. The second question I had, you said, if I understand from the summer school, some ESSER 2.0 months, there's some, would there be enough in that to cover the device shortfall as far as one-to-one on that?
Yes, that would be one of the areas we would address immediately, because it's the number one on the list.
Okay. All right, thank you.
We would start, those things that are in alternative are prioritized, so, if all of the things in the proposal are approved, or if we, you know, if we come back and discuss that infrastructure bill, we would start working down the alternative front. It's kind of structured in priority, so we would start working down that list.
And I guess that would be the case, if I could carry on that one more thing. Were we to approve as you presented it with the HVAC, I would assume if we get an infrastructure bill that would allow us to cover a large chunk of that, we would look at shifting that over at that point, and then we could possibly move on down the list. Okay.
Mr. Howell?
So, I have a few things here. I need a little clarification. On the staff bonus, it was $1,500 and $750 part-time. I don't recall a part-time being put in there, $750. It was a $1,500 bonus to all employees. What are you classifying as part-time?
Less than 29 hours per week.
Which position specifically?
It could be many different positions. It could be food service for one, permanent subs, let's see, also some part-time EAs. So yeah, we've got many different part-time positions. I have a list I can pull up specifically to go through, but basically an employee classified as part-time works under an average of 29 hours per week, which is not offered, you know, healthcare benefits and all that through us as an employer. This is how we did the previous bonus. It was just an idea. If that's something the board would like to change, I mean, the plan is here. It was just an easier way to pay it, so.
I just don't recall that being in the original 2 or 3 plans. It was a $1,500 bonus to all employees. I just don't want to get those are all positions that are difficult to fill, and are just as vitally important as a teacher, as a principal. I mean, if you're not feeding them lunch, they're not doing a lot of learning. If you're not getting them to school, they're not doing a lot of learning. So I mean, EAs talk about unsung hero. I mean, you know, without those, teachers don't get to teach a lot of times. They are with students just as much, if not more, in some cases. Some EAs are with a student all day long. I don't like I said, I misunderstood maybe. I thought it was gonna be a $1,500 to all employees. So I would definitely like to look at that and clarify that, and if that cost change, I'd like to know what that change would be. Yes.
This was one of the suggestions that we took from you guys, was to differentiate that, so that's why we put it in there as such. And, we'd heard that, you know, why are we paying all of this? Just we took the lead from you guys. I was asked to listen, and that was one of the things we kept hearing over and over, was differentiate.
Well, I did not say that, just to clarify, because I think that, once again, find me a job under 29 hours that, for the pay that we pay, find a person to fill that job. We need to keep as many as we can and retain them, just as much as teachers and everything else. So I would like to look at that. I don't feel that, I don't feel that's fair. I would like to see that change to 1,500 across the board. The educator recruitment, in here a little bit, it kind of specifically lays out some more information. So I wasn't aware of the hard to staff areas, such as chemistry and special education or ESL. Those are all hard. Math teachers, algebra teachers. At this point, really, a teacher would be classified under a hard, so I would kind of like to make that not in there. I would rather it be, I don't care if we have an EA that wants to be a PE teacher. They don't grow on trees either. So, I mean, I would definitely like to make sure that we are allowing anyone to apply for this program. If they want to become a teacher in Maury County Public Schools and we have the ability to make that happen, I would like to make that happen, because if we can do that, I just feel that builds a much more solid plan.
And I agree. It's not that we want to turn away anybody, but if we have 30 slots, let's say, and we have 50 teachers that apply, I think we need to let the hard-to-fill areas be precedent, because we have to differentiate.
I'm okay with that, but that's not really, I'm okay with that, but that's not really what we're looking at here. I want to make sure that I want it to be equitable. I want it to be open to all. Obviously, we want certain teachers that are harder to find. Foreign language, not in here. We want those, I'd like to have a little more comprehensive list of hard to find, and then they give precedence, but they're not the only ones. We also want to encourage others to apply as well. Books, materials, we definitely need those. I know the technology, that's a key component. However, that can be possibly addressed with other funding, so if it's not in this one, I feel like we hopefully will have funding for that. I've gone back and forth, I'll be honest with you. I was very much for, however, with new information that there's possibly a ESSER 4.0 where they're targeting infrastructure, and I would definitely call that infrastructure. I'm not so married to this idea of we have to spend this money, even though we've told the county commission that we could. So I'm open to suggestions with that, but I also would like to see increased substitute pay on this list as well, but not just substitutes. Once again, we have bus drivers that literally, we've got administration and people. People can't call the bus garage because there's nobody there to call. That is a key fundamental thing, so we need some people to be driving some buses as well. So I'd like to see that, something in there for our transportation as well. I think that about wraps up the therapist. I think that's a nice thing that we've added in there. I think that's a key thing. I've talked about that before, as Ms. Kinzer has mentioned. So, but I would like to reiterate that the HVAC is, that's not a sticking point for me. If it's in there, okay, but if it's not, if there's another mode of funding, I wouldn't mind having another mode of funding, and generally some of these alternatives be taking precedence over those. Thank you.
Mr. Lindsey.
I just want to speak in favor of the HVAC system. I just think it's, we've been given a golden opportunity to take care of needs that we know we're going to have. I understand that there's a possibility of ESSER 4.0, but I also well, I made this statement to a commissioner, I know what I have right now. I'm not sure of what I have coming, but I know what's in front of me. So, I think it's the fiscally responsible thing for us as a board to do. It may not be the most popular thing for us to do, but when it comes to being stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, I think it's the most fiscally responsible thing that we can do.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other lights. We'll take this up at our special called meeting afterwards. I just want to throw in my 2 cents worth. Mr. Howell, you brought up some very, very good points. I just would caution, I know if I were working a part-time job, I wouldn't expect the same bonus as the full-time employees. I'd like something, and I think that's why we need to definitely leave at least the part-time segment the way it is. That's just my opinion. Thank you for all your input tonight, and we'll take it up after this meeting. Moving on, operations information for the board. Mr. Perriman, would you like to fill us in on the county commission meeting last night? I would like you to lead with
Okay.
that.
Good evening. We did spend a relatively short amount of time with the county commission last night. They were very quick. They did, out of our $83 million that they moved from committee to full commission of our capital request, fund $74 million. They were clear in their meeting that this is your money to spend in the direction in which you see for us to spend it. That is our first ask tonight, is just clarification. The two numbers total to those two items, or if there is another way in which you would wish to spend that money. I don't know, and Mr. Fulbright and I talked last night, we don't know that it needs to go to a vote. Jake may clarify for that. Both items were on the capital list. We just need to know just kind of by yay or nay if you wish for us to do anything else or explore any other options as we move forward.
So the $70 million swimming facility for the school board is off the table at this point?
Unless, it's y'all's board to put it on or off of, so.
All right, maybe I'll not bring up any more suggestions. Mr. Moore, would you like to comment?
I mean, I guess my opinion would be just, we have a 5-year plan. I would assume we would move ahead with what we planned on.
Okay.
Yes, that's my assumption.
Mr. Howe?
That's exactly, I mean, why would we deviate from a plan that we've approved and are gonna revisit here in the fall going forward for the next 5 years? So no, why would we revisit this? I agree. We need to move forward with our plan. This is what we presented to the county commission, and this is our plan.
Well, and Mr. Lindsey, go ahead.
Well, I'm just gonna reiterate, I mean, our first priority was we stuck a $70 million price tag on the high school, so that's pretty self-explanatory, and that leaves $4 million, and just coincidentally, we had another project that was $4 million, but, I got a question. You may have a comment before I ask my question.
No, go ahead.
But I guess my next question is, what is our next step? As far as a board or a staff, I know that, I'm assuming we don't have an architect under contract for this project, so I'm assuming that that's step number one. And so I was, what you guys thinking, what that looks like for us?
So internally, what we've worked on today are those next steps. The first thing is, we do have to contract with an architect. And you know that no matter how we move forward with this, initially as we start this process, the board contracts with that. If we roll it into a GMP, then their fees and their monies become part of that GMP. But on the front end, we hire an architect.
Let me
Go ahead.
stop it. Could you also just introduce Mr. Bargatze behind you from
I can, and
Hewlett
Mr. Ron
Spencer.
Bargatze is here tonight. He's representing Hewlett Spencer. He was at the commission meeting with us last night, and he's worked on several projects with us across the district. Most of you guys know him.
Okay, just keep going. I just wanted to make sure we
So the
recognize.
first thing we would have to do is look at architects, and we are recommending that we would go ahead and issue an RFP and send it out and solicit some architects to talk to us and kind of look at where we are with that process. And we would like to go ahead and do that sooner rather than later. So just with your approval, we issue bids all the time without a vote, so we can issue the RFP, get the returns on that, and then come back to you for your approval, once we have those in. So that would be the first thing that would involve you guys that we would need to do.
Just to, can I comment on that, Mr.
Go ahead.
In the past, many years ago, we worked monthly, this board did, with architectural firm. And we had a contract with that architectural firm, so when it came time that contract ended, we went through the cumbersome process of bringing these firms in, interviewing them. We as a board did it, they presented all that. And this is just Wayne's feelings on it, but we no longer really operate like that. We don't deal with those architectural firms on a monthly basis, and we definitely don't deal with them on a daily basis. My hope would be that you guys put out an RFP, you accept the answers to that, and you bring us a recommendation, because the way I feel about it, you guys are, you're the ones gonna be held responsible for what comes out of that, and you're gonna work with them daily, rather than this board go through that process. I would hope, and I would think it would, not that speed is of importance, but it would expedite the process and kind of streamline it, and but that's just my feelings. I don't know what everybody else's feelings are.
And we're good with that upon your direction. It does fall under professional services, and I believe we can actually contact, if that, and Jake, am I right? We can put it in an RFP, but we could actually contact firms and solicit them for this, because it is a professional service. It doesn't have to go out for a bid or anything like that. The RFP would just be simply to get it out, and to post it so that we could show everybody that we have a project. But we can do that however you guys want to do that.
Mr. Lindsay, although I somewhat agree with that, because I don't wanna get too much in the weeds with trying to pick an architect, my understanding from the Battle Creek sites was we didn't pick that architect, and we have very expensive schools. I don't know, I've heard mixed feelings on the functionability of those schools, and we can't build onto them, things like that. And so I'm not saying that Mr. Perryman won't pick a good architect, but that's kinda how we got into that position, from my understanding of that.
I will say, and Mr. Bargatze can speak to architectural firms and questions. We have spent, just for your knowledge, Mr. Hall and I have spent roughly the last 2 years, and unbelievably, I'm in this position right now at 2 years. In that 2 years, we visited other counties and other districts, and we have looked at schools that they are building and how they've built them. We've talked to architectural firms, or we've talked with Mr. Bargatze specifically with Hewlett Spencer about different firms. We spoke to the folks in Williamson County about why they choose what they choose and how they go about doing it. Not to say that we wanna do what they do, but we just wanted an understanding of the process and what they've gone through. We'll handle this however you guys choose, but it is a professional service, so you do have kind of a wide scope on how you want us to bring things to you.
Okay. And I will kind of piggyback off of what Mr. Sims said. I have a feeling the architect produces basically what we request sometimes. So I think if we request something more functional, more, like I told somebody this afternoon, we don't want the building where we have all the bells and whistles and they fall off in 5 years. We want a functional, building that facilitates good learning. So I think if we were to tell an architect that, we would get a different result than what we got out of Battle Creek, would be my guess.
And I would say, we have feelings on the architect that we worked with some different things that we internally experienced, but I will say this, they built exactly what they were asked to build.
That's kinda what I'm getting at, is
Yeah.
I think, yeah, okay. Mr. Moore?
Yeah, if I could speak to that for a second. I know, having been here with Wayne, I think we've seen the evolution of how we handle these processes from early on, when I first got on the board. I think over the last couple of years, and I think Eric's spoken to this, we've kind of built the internal capacity that we did not have to understand what we need, what we're actually looking for, and really be in the driver's seat. I know if I look back on, as we've done several different projects through the last few years, sometimes it felt like this board and even staff at times weren't really in the driver's seat. Sometimes it felt like the architect was driving the bus and deciding what was going there. Said, well, we're going to have fun with this. We're going to daydream and really design to whatever our designer feels like putting in there. And then we may have had other people in leadership positions that got what they wanted. I think from what I've heard from Mr. Perryman and staff, I think we're at a point where we've put a focus on programming in the school, which should be paramount to anything else. Design, everything should be following that function. I think we're at a good place for that. And as long as that's what this board is focused on with staff, we can give you guys clear directives on that. I think we can move through this and keep that focus and come up with a good product. And at all times, this board can feel like we're getting exactly what we feel like we need because it's being driven by the programming, the function coming first. Then we need to be going somewhere else, and that includes architecture, that includes construction, whatever it is. But I think as long as this board sets a standard, we're driving this based on programming, and that's all we're going to allow. If somebody won't give us, I think, Mr. Perryman, you in a conversation used this is our house. And as the homeowners, we deserve to get the house we want built. And as long as we keep that focus, I think we'll be in a good place to make sure we can keep costs where we need them and get the product we need when we're done.
And I agree with you 100%, Mr. Moore. Eric and I have talked about that extensively. You know, obviously, you want an attractive school. You don't want to just put something that's junk. But with that said, I agree with the bells and whistles. If the bells and whistles do not impact our students directly, we're not getting that bell and whistle. We're going to put that money back into, you know, something that will impact students. And we've made that clear with each other. You know, it's funny you say about the programming, because after, you know, we've talked about the steps, and right after we find out who our architecture we're going to go with that, the next step is we program it by talking to instruction, talking to principals, and we've got a plan. And matter of fact, I tasked Eric today to make sure we have a format for that, so people aren't just shooting emails or sending scratch pad stuff. So I agree with you 100%.
That process actually starts simultaneously. I mean, we start that process now, from within, talking internally, in this building beyond the normal educational program of a high school. What is our seat? What building the campus, and we're sharing a campus up there. How do we start that process? What do we do as we move forward? And as we move forward and we begin to program and say, okay, here's what we are, then we to say, what do you see, what do you want, what do you feel? And obviously you take all of that in and you kind of sort through it, and you come back to what the needs of the district are and what makes sense. But then as the architect comes in, that gives us much more, it provides a lot clearer picture for them of what we want our house to look like. And what we've done over the last couple of years, and I've mentioned this to you in retreats, is look at the different buildings that are out there and really open ourselves up to what can we do to make things flow. I will give you this. When we walk a building, it is complete opposite looks at that building. He is looking at how it is built and what the bones of it and how it functions. I am looking at how you move students around a building and how you operate that building on an internal basis. We came to that clarification at Battle Creek Middle. We stopped in the middle of the hall and he said, "You're not looking at what I'm looking at." And I said, no, I'm not. That's a strength. That's also a weakness at times, because I don't always see what he sees. He doesn't always see stakeholder input, and that's where the principals and the different people who have lived in buildings that come in. You guys as well, your experiences as parents, your experiences as teachers, your experiences just as people who go to a ball game. What do you see, what do you do, and how does this help us function? And on the campus, the athletics, you got an athletic guru sitting right here behind you. Ask him how wide a lane is, or how wide a floor is, or something, and he just starts spouting numbers about those things. And those are things that we do have to play into, parking lots and all kinds of different things. So we're working through that, but simultaneously with choosing an architect and bringing that information for you however you choose, it would be starting that input from everyone.
Okay. Mr. Howell, you got the last light.
So I just really, it'll be short. Just want to echo, you know, really and truly, it's about, at the end of the day, it's about programming. It's about our students. It's also about a highly class. Some of our buildings have been form over function, and you understand that. I have no doubt that you understand that. So I just want to make sure that going forward, you know, I want it to be a nice building. I want it to be a good-looking building. I don't need a special exterior product that I can't remember the name of it, and he knows what I'm talking about. And I don't need lots of glass that look beautiful. But who's going to clean that? I don't know. Do we still know? No, we don't. So, you know, I just want it to look nice and be functional, and, you know, thank you.
Ms. Kinzer.
This is so quick. I want a Frank Lloyd Wright building.
You have to.
Form follows function.
Yes, ma'am.
No, form follows
Follows function.
function.
All right, seeing no other lights, I just want to, before we move off of this subject, say I think one of the reasons that we're actually having this discussion tonight is because last week we sat down with the county commission together to discuss where we're going with this. And I want to thank the school board members who are all in attendance. I want to thank all the county commissioners who were there. This obviously takes both groups working together. And the way we had been doing it, ping-ponging ideas back and forth, was not the right way. Once we got our heads together and sat down, I think it was what pushed this to a successful end. And I would like to say, next year, as we start the budget process, I'd like to see us do that, something similar, a lot sooner in the process than the middle of August. Mr. Moore.
If I could go with that, Mr. Chairman, I would as well like to thank the commission for, you know, helping us facilitate a joint meeting on that. And I think one of the most important things that came out of this was the work we put into the 5-year plan.
Mm-hmm.
I am very excited. I mean, just as a fiscal conservative, I appreciate that this body took the time to put a plan together and is taking the time to keep that plan updated. I think that is the responsible thing for us to do moving ahead, to be able to, we're not going to surprise the county commission next year with what's on our list. We've already created a document that shows exactly where we're headed.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, things may change as needs change, but we have a plan and we're going to keep that updated. And I think that's a responsible thing for us to do, to give our funding body, so that at all times they're aware of kind of what's on our radar, and they can start, even if, whether we have a meeting or not, they can start now adjusting, because they already know.
Yeah.
You know, I know there are a couple of commissioners who questions, you know, what's next? My response to that is it's on that list.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as we start to check things off the list, some other things are going to move up. And I know one of the things I had spoken to some of the commissioners, it may be a good idea for us to go ahead and send them a FYI copy of our 5-year plan every quarter, just to make sure they recall it. And if we make changes, maybe send them an updated version, just as an FYI to the admin committee perhaps, for them to make sure that it's always in front of them, that these are our needs, and it's not just, we don't just wait until budget time to throw something at them.
Exactly. Very good. Thank you very much. And the last thing on this, as I'll say, is just because we have listed there 70 million, doesn't have to be a $70 million building. We could get by with 65. So,
Yes, sir.
just saying. All right, let's move on to the next.
So I do have two things to say. One is,
Okay.
I'm very excited to go ahead and begin the process of updating that 5-year plan, because if you remember, we started about this time last year, and it was actually December when we kind of landed upon it. So that's a conversation that will start coming to you rather quickly over the next month. The second thing is, we do have to address, Hewlett Spencer's contract is up at the end of this year. We do need to issue an RFP and rebid our construction manager services, and go ahead and do that as well, because they are up at the end of December.
Okay.
Now, we do start this process, and we need to start this process now, but I need to just be upfront and say we do have to issue that RFP as well.
Okay.
Okay, because their omnibus does expire at the end of December. As far as other items on the agenda tonight, if that hadn't happened last night, we were real quick tonight, because I don't have a lot for you. Just some updates. One, the documents provided are the same ones as always at Trained. We have wrapped up and are almost 100% done on Santa Fe. We do have some savings that came out of that. We knew the commission gave us more than We knew the cost would be, so we're gonna come back to you probably as early as next work session with some, things that we would like to do to spend that money that they left us, and they were good with that on the front end. We're gonna start at Santa Fe and address some things there, and if we have money left over, we may venture into other places. The second thing I wanna note to you is we wrapped up, or wrapping up this month, the lighting project at Spring Hill High School. If you remember through EESI, is that right? EESI, we got the grant to do the lighting on the outsides of all the schools. We left Spring Hill High School off because we weren't sure what was gonna happen, but then we came back and funded that ourselves. And I would just like everyone to know, we did not leave it off of the list, and we have not neglected it in any way. It has been funded just like everything else, and it will be wrapped up this month. We will have McDowell posted for bid on September 1. We have worked with Doug's office and with Jake. We're working through that right now, and everything is ready to move forward on that process, and that just comes from last month. And other than that, I just want to take a second to say thank you. The things you've said, let's echo it from our side as well. I said this to Mr. Fulbright last night. We appreciate the work that everyone put into this, but a unified message from you guys and from us went a long way over the course of the months with the ups and the downs, and it's very nice to look back and see y'all there, and it's very nice that we were able to do what we did last week. I talk good about you to them, I talk bad about you to them, and I'll do that with you guys as well. It's good when it's good, and it's not when it's not, but a very unified effort was very much appreciated from this side of the table, and I think we need to let you know that, so thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on now to policies.
Only 6 tonight. I put in the rationale as to why each one of them were being changed. 3 of them were actually just updating. The reason they originally were getting posted was to update information from Mr. Carl Lang, who resigned, to Mr. Jeff Ritchie. In that process, I send these to the TSBA before I put these on the board agenda, and they caught a few other things that had been updated in law that needed to be added. The special programs is just updating some information to deal with COVID-19. The virtual education policy is a new policy that's being added, basically to deal with COVID-19 and any students who's having to stay home, they're being sick or quarantined because of COVID. This allows them to have that remote learning. Not that all students are remote learning, but if they're homesick due to these reasons. And then 6.300, our trauma-informed behavior, that came up when the staff was looking at updating our student handbook policy. The original policy was like 40 pages long, so we have taken it down with all staff, safety, instruction, all staff looked over this policy and got it down to these 17 pages, and that's where we're at. If you have any specific questions, happy to answer.
Any specific questions, or can we move it to consent? Consent agenda it is. Thank you very much for preparing these for us. Other business, instructional low bids, it looks like we have one. Any discussion, Mr.
No, sir.
King?
It's just our Ames Web renewal. The state has, now taken over a portion of that, so it is less than we've had it in the past.
Okay. Consent it is. Operations low budget. Microsoft renewal.
That is the renewal for the entire district, office products.
Consent? Okay. Salary study quote. Who's got that?
The board had asked me earlier about getting some quotes for a salary study, and this is the one that the county government uses. It also happened to be quite a bit less than the other one, and we had 3 names. One never reported back to us, so we wanted to keep this in your back up again. Here's the quote you asked for.
Okay. Do we need to take any action on this? Okay. Mr. Sims.
Mr. Lukonen, I'd mentioned or asked previously if the county commission paid for the other departments to have a salary study done. Did we mention that to them about having our salary study done also?
They had paid for basically all county, a study of all county employees and positions, job descriptions, and so it is in the HR budget on the county side to do that. So if we decided to move forward with this, we would amend the HR department's budget and, have Jennifer work with the people doing the study to complete it and, review job descriptions and pay.
Where would these funds come out of?
141-725-20399.
Okay. Is this something we wanna proceed? I guess do we wanna take a formal vote at the board meeting, or we wanna put it on consent? Mr. Lindsay?
I think we probably have to. I mean, it's an expenditure over $10,000, so we would.
Okay.
But, I think it's very important that we do this. It's, we can talk about it, we can, instruct Miss, Gerard to do it, and no, and what I'm about to say, I hope no one takes it wrong, but, she can do it and be totally unbiased, but there'll still be some perceived bias by somebody in it. If we hire a third party to do it, that just happens to be the one that the county's using from this firm, to me, it would be difficult for them not to accept the findings from this firm when it comes to the school side as well. So I just think it's it gets someone outside of our circle looking at it that brings us back good information, and we have to do something. We talked tonight a little bit about, we have certain classified positions that I have no idea how we keep people employed in them. I mean, it's embarrassing, really. And so we have to do something, and we need some guidance, and in my opinion, this is the first step in hopefully correcting some atrocious wrongs. But
Okay, Mr. Moore?
Yeah, I guess my only ask with this, and I think we should probably move ahead and put it on a meeting. My ask for this would be that we make sure, if we're going to do this, I would like staff to create a timeline for when we're going to review it, and then what process we're to go through to either accept it or not accept it. I just would like to have some kind of formal process that follows this up. I don't want to get it and us just kind of sit around and go, okay, that's nice, and it just fall to the wayside. If we're going to get it, we need to have a process for reviewing it, deciding if we're going to accept any information in it, and then how that is going to flow into things. So if you guys could, if this passes, whenever it's on in a voting meeting, if you could put that together, and also in the coming, I don't know how long this takes. Do we have an idea of when this would be completed?
So, this would be completed before, we have to submit our budget to the commission. That's the expected timeline. That's why we're trying to move on it now, so that it can be submitted as part of our budget.
And then definitely, if you, staff, again, if you could put that together so that there's a process for us to do something with it, whatever this board chooses to do at that time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Howe?
You know, we did one of these 3 years ago, so, I mean, this is something that, yeah, there you go, she knows. Even though she wasn't here, she knows the answer, that's great. So, you know, I think this is something that we just have to do. We have to stay current, we have to stay constant, and this environment that we're in, not including in COVID, just the fast-paced environment that we're in, you know, we can't find employees, and neither can anybody else. And that goes from not just educational standpoint, that goes to, I mean, Popeye's Chicken offering a $1,200 bonus for a cashier, you know. So, I mean, you know, this is something that we have to look at, to be current. I just want to make sure that it's a comprehensive study, that it's not just a salary study. It includes pay and benefits, everything, because
Yeah, to go through the job descriptions, and for the last ones they did, it wasn't actually a full, complete study. It
Right.
didn't actually get completed. In the initial email that the gentleman sent me, he said December of '21, so hopefully to get it
Okay.
if we can get moving on it, so, which would definitely give us time for our budgeting.
thank you.
Good to hear. All right, thank you very much. Let's move on to the out-of-zone appeals. This is, if nothing else, caused me a little confusion over the last couple weeks. Where do we stay? What's going on with this?
Currently, we have approximately, approximately 20 families that have, when we did the out-of-zone appeal, when they did the out-of-zone appeal, we couldn't approve it at our level because there was, principals looked at their enrollment, they were at that 5% threshold, and they couldn't they couldn't accept those students. So by the policy, those students have an opportunity, those parents can appeal this to the board. So they chose, these 15 chose. Now, we had a number of other appeals that people just chose to accept but you have approximately 20 families that want to come before you and present their case and let you decide whether they can go to their, approve their appeal or, stay with, you know, they go to their zone school.
Well, and I
And
guess,
Mr. Ritchie can add more.
yeah, I was gonna say, my questions are gonna revolve around, does it have to be the whole, has the board done this before? Ms. Kinzer?
I wasn't on the board, but I was part of an appeals committee.
That's what I was getting at.
I mean, I was a teacher at the time, and there was a different variety of people on it. I actually had people I knew that had, you know, real reasons, but we had to deny for different reasons, but we also did it as well. I don't know, I've never heard of the whole board,
Yeah, I didn't think that's,
but I'm not sure I want to be on it.
give us some guidance on what we do to get this resolved.
Basically, we're just looking at best case in a way to streamline this, since there's quite a few.
Mm-hmm.
What that looks like can be entirely up to you. What we're needing to communicate to these parents, time, what have you, but just whatever you want us to do, but this is probably the most efficient way to do it.
I guess, do we have to have a certain amount of people on the committee? Do we?
You need an
Can
odd
I
amount.
speak to that? Just,
Yeah.
so you got a policy that says anyone can appeal any action of the school system to the board. You don't have to hear it, I mean, but you have to choose whether to hear it or not. So my suggestion would be in bulk, maybe to put these on as a confidential attachment and let the board look at each appeal. And probably there's gonna be like a paragraph or a page from
Yes,
each
sir.
family.
Actually, we can make that happen this evening. Mr. Gaines can forward that to Shirley for confidential. We actually have their paperwork for their out-of-zone appeal request, and we also have, the cover sheet where they're requesting to go to, and we even have the capacity numbers of the school, enrollment, all of that. And, I can give you hard copies tonight too, if you'd like that, just to sleep on it.
So my suggestion would be that these all show up as an item on your next agenda, and you choose, if there's any of those that you wanna hear, then you choose to have those heard. And then that would be as a full board. You really don't have a policy that covers, any mechanism to set up a committee to have those heard. So you would choose to either hear it as a full board or not to hear it at all.
All right, so I know we're working with a time frame on these too, so how does that coordinate with our time frame?
The big time frame was they had 10 days upon the beginning of the school to notify the board,
Okay.
which that 10 days is now officially over, so
Okay.
we don't have to push anymore. Obviously, you can always hear what you always wanted to hear.
But certainly, you know, we would wanna do it sooner rather than later,
Yeah,
because
oh, yeah.
if you overturn the decision, they're gonna go to a different school, and the sooner we do that in the semester, the better. But, no, the time limit's run, if they filed an appeal, it's been filed, so now it's up to you.
I guess I'm just wondering, if we do it at the next board meeting, are we pushing it out too far?
No, they've gotta go where they've been zoned, at least temporarily. You would have the ability to overturn that decision, but, I mean, they're enrolled now at the school that they're in zone for. So you could set a special call meeting if you wanted to, but no, I wouldn't think that the next regular meeting would be too late to do, given the timeframes.
And if I may, that's what we've instructed these parents, like, they have to go to their school of zone until this hearing. So that's been consistent across the board.
But as far as all right, say we take these up and hear them at the full board meeting in September. We don't do that in an open forum because we're discussing academic privacy issues, right?
That's correct. What you would do is vote whether or not to have an appeal, whether or not to have a hearing on one or all or some.
Okay.
So, yeah, that would be set at a different date. We would do that behind closed doors.
And then don't we have to give them 10 days notice?
of the date of their appeal?
There's no 10-day notice requirement. You'd wanna give them enough notice that they could prepare and have their hearing.
I was thinking there was a 10-day period.
It was our understanding in the policy that it was 10-day notice.
What the policy reads is it's 10 days, the parents have to appeal.
Okay, so we don't
Which
have to
the
let them
beginning
know,
of school.
have a meeting 10 days.
Like,
Correct.
if a parent would send an appeal now, it's automatically denied because their 10 days are up.
Go ahead.
The superintendent would just give them notice of when the hearing is set.
Okay. Do we just, Ms. Kinzer? Ms. Kinzer? Your mic. Yeah, turn your light off.
I would think it's entirely up to you all.
Who was in the school rezone, but he's an eighth grader, okay? So, you know, that was his last year to be at the school, and he would go to Central the next year, and that just seemed like an appropriate thing to allow him to do that. But now, how much time? 2 weeks has gone by since then, and you're talking 2 weeks before we have another meeting. And I'm not a glutton for punishment, but I would be willing, if there were a couple other board members, to sit, if we could do that legally, just.
Take 6 of us to do anything.
Well, I don't know necessarily we have to have a quorum.
No, that's what I'm saying.
But we can't overturn an appeal without a vote of 6
Well,
of us.
we would only send the ones that have to be to the board. You'd have to weed them out. You've gotta weed them out, right? No?
No, they've all made appeals to the board. The board now has to choose if it's gonna take up any of those appeals. And Ms. Gerard pointed out to me that it's not in the policy, but there is a state law that they get 10 days advance notice of the hearing, so you're correct on that. But yeah, the board has to take action. If the board wants to hear an appeal, then it would take 6 votes to make that hearing happen.
Mr. Howe, yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So, through all of this back and forth over meetings and times and how this should work and can work and should work and might work, and I think maybe we're losing scope of one thing, and that's the children. I mean, I know it's 15 children that are affected by this, but it's 15 children that, at this point, they're 2 weeks into a school at which they may or may not be at. So, let's put this off at the minimum 10 days. Now we're 3 weeks into a school that, once again, they may or may not be there. We've talked earlier about shifting teachers and things, and how imperative that first little bit where they're kind of making that relationship with that teacher are. These parents, these families, they cared enough to appeal it for a reason. So, I mean, I don't care when this meeting has to happen. I'd like for it to happen now. State law says that can't happen now. We need to have this happen sooner than later, and we need to make time for it, just like we make time for a budget meeting or a special called meeting or whatever. So I recommend we have a special called meeting, I don't know, 10 days from now, and send notice to these parents immediately that that's when we're gonna have the meeting.
2 business days or? Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. I wanna follow the law, I wanna follow everything, but I also want to make sure that we're looking out for the best interest of these children, and pushing this out to a board meeting just doesn't, I don't think that that's in the best interest.
Okay, Mr. Moore?
Mr. Ritchie, do we have the information in the documentation you have showing the reason why they were denied? Do we also have the impacts were we to move them back?
Yes, sir. We do have their justification for the request itself that the
Okay.
parents filled out. And then we also have capacity numbers, current capacity numbers, and current enrollment. Now granted, we'll do another 20-day count tomorrow, so with our, no-shows and stuff, that'll be change a little bit. But
Okay.
this is up to date as of Friday of last week in terms of numbers.
Okay.
And I'd be more than happy to go ahead and give each of you one of these. You'll have a hard copy.
I mean, I guess for me, I mean, I agree with Mr. Howell that we need to do this sooner rather than later, but I have some functional questions that I may have to inquire this before I decide what happens. I mean, it kind of puts us in a tough spot. I know we've already sent the kids back to the school of maybe where they weren't or don't want to be, but again, they're already there. Now we're further turning the apple cart over yet again a couple of weeks in. I don't know. It's a tough one. I would hope that we would kind of look at some of these things and maybe before this happens next year, we have some policies in place, maybe a panel that can help us weed through this faster, maybe some other processes in place. And I'll also say, some of this is the fallout from when we made some changes to our own policy. Why I had said then it's important for us to make sure that we do this right when we do it and make sure we don't, at the last minute, decide to change gears. It kind of leaves the kids in the lurch.
Well, I do think we should have expected this to happen anytime we do a mass rezoning. You're gonna have more people than upset about it than you did the year before when you didn't rezone. So I think this is totally to be expected. Just for my 2 cents worth, tomorrow's the 18th, 10 days from tomorrow is Saturday, the 28th. I don't think we need to come up here then. The soonest we could probably get it on the calendar would be August 30th. Just throwing that out there for dates and start thinking about that. Mr. Lindsay?
Mr. Ritchie, that documentation you have, does it specify in that the reason for their denial also?
Yes, sir. It's either due to enrollment or it could be grades/behavior. We do have one that is for bullying, but it's at Columbia Central and it happened the first day of school. They didn't allow Mr. Edie to actually do a full investigation or anything like that. But to expedite all of this, and they could wanted to streamline this process and put them all in one lump sum, just to take care of that. But you'll see all of that in the packet, and like I said, we can send it to you electronically too as well, if need be.
Yeah, and I'm fine to meet on the 30th also, but, Mr. Gaines, you said something about a 5% rule, but we don't that, policy anymore. That was the last action we did, that we took that 5% out. So I hope we didn't deny people because of a violation of the 5% rule, but, so I'm willing to, as soon as we can, take care of it.
Okay.
In any of those cases, they denied if their enrollment would cause them to, to add a teacher. That's where those students were denied.
Okay, so that was the criteria more so than the others, okay. Do we wanna just go ahead and say we'll meet on the 30th then? 6 o'clock, okay? It is a Monday. All right, we'll plan on that at 6 o'clock then.
So with the board's permission, it's okay to go ahead and contact those parents and let them know, and we can work out the logistics between now and then.
For a meeting at 6 o'clock on Monday, August 30th? You look confused.
I often look confused. We would have to approve whether or not we're going to hear the appeal, which is different than actually the appeal itself.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. If we wanna expedite this, we just gotta go ahead and say we'll do them all for that 10-day calendar to start. But if we wanna take 4 days to look through them, then that 10 days doesn't start for another 4, till then.
I would suggest that we, on the 30th, that we have a special called meeting, we take a vote on ones we hear or we don't. We may not hear any. If we vote that we don't hear any, when it's over with, we get up and leave. If we decide we wanna hear 5, then we've already noticed those parents today.
Yeah, but we're not gonna call parents up here and then vote and not have them be heard.
If they feel, I mean, yeah, I mean, this is.
So we're gonna send out 20 letters to say, hey, come up on the whatever date we decide, you may or may not be heard by the board on that night.
I think we need to see these, like you said. First of all, if they've been denied, excuse me, I'm taking over here, I guess, but, if they've been denied because of discipline, attendance, or anything like that, that they have had at this school, and they wanna go, they need to go back to their school of zone. I'm not gonna vote for anybody to stay put if they have had those issues.
Yes, ma'am, and keep in mind, they're currently at their school of zone.
Okay.
So that we wouldn't be sending them back. They're currently there. That was what we told them to
So,
do.
but the parents may come twice, 'cause if we put it on an agenda, they can come speak to it, and then we vote whether to hear them or not. If we vote to hear them, then we're gonna tell them to come back a second night to have the hearing.
In looking at the statute, I suggest setting them all, and then you look through that night, and you have the ability, if the board's goal is to get this done as quickly as possible, put them all on the agenda for one special call meeting. You just do them, you meet, decide which ones you wanna hear that night.
I was gonna say, I mean, we can read through these ahead of time and pretty much know and have our mind made up. I don't think, you know, if my kid's beating somebody up and I show up, I want you to at least hear me out before you tell me no. If I'm gonna drive up here from Culleoka or Mount Pleasant. I mean, if we put a time limit on it, can't we?
Yes.
5
Yes,
minutes?
it's
3 minutes,
recommended
5 minutes?
a 5-minute time limit.
I'd say that's good.
And this is something else to consider. You can listen to them in that 5-minute limit, and then I don't think they would have to make that decision at that very particular time. They could get back through a letter or something, so that could expedite.
Yes.
Yeah, it's up to you, whether you wanna rule in person
Right.
or later.
But you'd
you
hear
do
their
have to give 'em
case,
a
be a
ruling
good
one way or
PR
the other.
moment.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, we could also, similar to the way we do, we can upload them secure before the meeting. Once we set the meeting, we could upload them to the agenda where you'd all be able to read through each parent's appeal, and then when you come to the meeting, you know, you could call them up to ask if they have any more comments. You could listen to those comments, and like, Mr. Wilbur said, you can say, you know, we make a decision later, and we can return those decisions by letter, or however we wanna do it that way.
And Jennifer made a good comment. When we make contact with these parents to let them know when to show up, we can assign them time slots to at least try to space that out as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, we could do that. Then we may end up, if we have a bunch that are very short, you know, 2 minutes, 3 minutes each, and then you got somebody scheduled at 7 o'clock and
True.
they don't show up till 7. I wouldn't see anything prohibiting these on that if we do it on Monday the 30th. And we would have our notes in front of us and could be able to make the decisions 5 minutes after that meeting.
You could have a list,
And I'm sure we will.
yes or no. You know, I mean, literally, and we wouldn't have to have a roll call vote or a digital vote. We just check off the ones
Yeah.
that, and that's it. Then you would tell them by letter and don't give our address out.
Yes, ma'am. Do you want me to go ahead and pass those out to you tonight, the hard
Sure,
copies?
you've
I
got
can do
Yes,
that
please.
now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chair
So are
Fulbright,
we set to do the 30th?
before you said, I don't necessarily have to be here, but we do have a student recognition that night, and I would think you were invited to it, 'cause it's for an art presentation, but it starts
Sure.
at 6:30.
Oh darn, I can't be here.
I know, can you see the hurt in her eyes?
I'm assuming, because it's art, and usually that you always get invited to those type deals. So, I will have to do that, but I don't think y'all need me here for that, as long as y'all have Scott and Jeff.
Okay. All right. Okay. We'll do that then, Monday the 30th, 6 o'clock. Is that the board consensus? Board consensus? Just to clarify, yes, sir.
Just to clarify, so we would have a meeting with an agenda.
No.
Okay, well, we have to have an agenda. But we have to vote to hear them or not first, so it'd have to be the first thing. I'm assuming that we're kind of all in,
This is outside the realm of our normal Robert's
Yeah.
rules, I
What
think.
it sounds like to me is that you're gonna hear all of them. You're at least gonna give anyone that wants to hear or wants to be
Okay.
heard the opportunity to speak on all 15 matters, and that would be done one at a time. So we would exclude the other folks, bring them in one at a time if they wanted to speak. You'll have the information, at least the record, what I'll call it, that Mr. Ritchie's given you. So, I mean, you would then vote the ones that you wanna overturn, I guess, at the end, is what I'm hearing from the board. So, you just do it all at once. You're putting it on an agenda, the board is consenting to have them all heard on one night.
Okay, so beyond that, what we're saying is some way we're going to have these names and then just beside them, we're gonna have a yes or no? Is that what we're?
Yes.
So say
Correct.
So say a sheet with a yes or no column, and we just hand them over, and they're tabulated, and we're done, right?
I would think that's pretty much.
Just wanna
the
make
way
sure
we're
we have
looking at it.
clarification. Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Lindsey?
I guess I'm the dense one, I'm struggling, but I haven't looked at these, I got them turned upside down, so I haven't looked at them at all. But I don't wanna take anybody's time if there's 23 on the list, I lied, I looked, I saw it was 23, but but there's 23. If 20 of them is because the kids can't act right, I don't wanna waste anybody's time. The mechanism is in place whether we even why we get to vote whether to hear it or not. I guess that's what I'm struggling with. There may be some legitimate reasons, and I'm willing to listen to those, but I don't wanna listen. Any decision that gets made throughout the district can be appealed to this board. So if we open Pandora's box and we start listening to every Sally got sent home because she violated dress code today, we're opening ourselves up to hearing everything. And we have policies in place and procedures in place. So I think it's important that we take that vote whether to even hear it or not before we actually hear the appeal.
Any comments? I just can't reiterate it enough. I think it's bad form to say, hey, come up to the school board building at 6 o'clock Monday on the 30th from Hampshire. We may or may not hear you out on your concerns about your child's placement. I just don't see that.
But we've done it before.
I haven't.
But there's been people show up that wanted to appeal something to the board, and this board, the motion gets made to not hear it, or it doesn't receive a motion, it fails due to a lack of a motion. That person is sitting here looking at us, and they get up and walk out the door. I just think we better be careful when we start hearing every little appeal. I get that we need to hear things that are legitimate, but I just think that there may be some in here that are not legitimate.
Well, then I think that's the balance between how fast do we want to do this versus how much do we want to filter.
One possibility you all could think about is look through these over the next few days, then get back in touch with Mr. Gaines on the ones that you do want to hear. Even if somebody did appeal something for whatever reason, you still have the right as a board to decide if you want to hear it or not. I believe, is that correct?
What about this? And Jake, can't we do this? Because an appeal, they can decide not to hear them at all. Can we form a committee and go back to what Ms. Kinzer was saying, and possibly have a committee that will recommend before that 10 days? Because you gave yourself a little cushion since we're waiting 3 days past that 28th. Them to come together and say, yeah, we do need to have this heard, and this one not. Can we do that, Jake?
I don't think so. I just don't, I think state law makes this non-discretionary. I think you have to at least review all these and give them a yes or a no. So, whether you do that all at once or you do it separately, I think you at least have to go through, you have to have an agenda item that deals with these hearings. So my suggestion is do it all at once. I mean, I think this is a different animal. I don't think we've ever had this this amount, but I think, and I don't like the idea of hearing one and not hearing them all, because then I think we're starting to pick and choose, or at least it could be seen that way. My suggestion is put them all on if you're gonna do that. If you wanna do it on a special call night, then do it on a special call night, but do them all at once.
And we can help streamline that process on that evening. Like I said, I can be the PR guy, talk to them out there, bring them in one at a time, do the process, and it's my understanding that you'll go ahead and make that decision at that time, and then I can have them exit this way to where they don't have to raise Cain on the way back out when they face them.
Well, I think we'll make it after the meeting so that we're not face to face saying, hey, nice appeal, but you're not staying at, you know, whatever. We would collaborate after the meeting, vote, or whatever, just make those determinations, and then you guys send out the letter the next day, or make the contact however you do it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and quite honestly, I would be, especially if we're not getting into a back and forth, I don't see very many of these lasting past 3 minutes. If we're not getting into a back and forth. Yeah, and that's the other part too.
And a way to expedite that in the conversation is you can say that you all had an opportunity
We've
to
already
review
read
the
everything.
paperwork. Is there anything you'd like to add or whatever?
Yeah.
And then do
Okay.
that. But we'll communicate the 5-minute limit when we make these contacts.
Okay. And I will say, even though there's 23 names on here, some of them are siblings, so it's the same family.
Correct, and when we do call tomorrow and let them know the August 30th date, they may say, you know what, never mind, we'll just stay where we're at,
Yeah.
so.
All right. I know there's been quite a bit of discussion, but I think proceeding the 30th at 6 o'clock, the way we've been talking, is the best option. But with time limits and a very short discussion among ourselves afterwards on what to do with the appeals.
I think moving forward, and I know we gotta deal with this now, but I think next year, when we hit July, we need to go ahead and set these dates just in case.
Yeah.
If that is, we're not doing the lottery.
That's gonna, yeah, that, don't forget the legislation pending for next year of open enrollment for the first, 2 weeks or something? All right. We'll proceed with that then. I believe that's all. Oh, wait, no, I got one more item. We did get a new school board member last night, in addition to a, funding proposal. Winston Harlan will be joining us as the District 3 representative, was approved last night by the County Commission. I invited him to be here tonight, but I know it's kind of short notice, so that may be why he's not here. We will get with our county mayor, and whenever he's in town, we will see if we can work out a time that he can, swear in our new school board member. And I'll try to contact his office tomorrow unless somebody else needs to do that. Can swear him in? Okay. I'll figure out somebody to get here, and we'll swear him in prior to September's meeting. Well, I could invite him to the special call and do it then. Yeah. All right, that takes care of all the business I had for the initial meeting, or our regular work session. So I'd like to go ahead and, adjourn. We'll take, oh, yes.
I did put the one policy that you had asked me to put on as a FYI that will be coming up at the September, the compensation guides and
Okay.
contracts.
Yeah, thank
So,
you very much.
Yeah, I'll be in contact with the board members about that unless you wanted me to go into anything further
No,
now.
not right now.
Okay.
I do want to make one last comment. This just entered my mind. One of the things that we've talked about over the last several months is getting equity in our programs across the county. I've heard that there's been some very positive conversations between Commissioner Evans and his project for a student-led history museum and the Kids on Stage organization to help them organize that program. And from what he said, they have some very high-level support from some of the industries in that area. I'm not going to go into any details in case any of them wanted to remain silent about it. But the fact that they're lending their organization skills and networking to Spring Hill now, in addition to Mount Pleasant, says a lot about that goal that we've set for ourselves. So let's adjourn and meet back in 5 minutes, and we'll take up the ESSER and the teaching positions.